I mean, self-confidence is half the battle.
Yeah, it really is.
It's just like when overconfidence happens. That's when it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all right to have a lot of confidence. I mean, you can only make shit happen if you believe it.
That part. And that's, I think, a really good note to go in on. Well, Marcus is hitting this dab here. I'm going to do a little introduction.
Hot mic.
Hot mic. No,
Literally.
I mentioned this right before our break, but we're a year out from the full legalization, the legalization bill passing here in Minnesota. I'm really excited to be able to talk to Marcus a little bit about some of the stuff that led up to that bill passing, but also sort of get your thoughts now a year out from it. I'm glad that we got that dab in. We're feeling ready.
God
we're feeling
damn.
good to go. We're getting an honest Marcus. And I'm excited to be able to just sort of dig in a little bit about like who you are, because people who've been listening to this show almost for the past year now, like we've been doing this since June of last year.
Oh, shit.
People have been listening to our voices for a while. They might not actually know who is Marcus Harcus. So today I've got some questions I put together. A lot of these I might know a little bit to the answer to, but I'm also curious to get your thoughts about some of the things that we haven't talked about yet. So are you ready to jump in?
Fuck. You texted me saying, was I open to an interview while I was driving from the North Shore? And I was like, okay, but I was like, why is he interviewing me?
What do you mean, Marcus? Because I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into who is Marcus Harcus.
Okay.
And so I went back in the archives.
Okay.
February 1996, the Star Tribune published an article looking at how do high schoolers feel about cannabis? Do they think the media is leading people to consume more cannabis? What did high schoolers just think about cannabis generally?
Yeah.
A senior at Patrick Henry High School by the name of Marcus Harcus, then 17 years old, was asked, do you like cannabis? And of course, the quote that they say is that he tried pot, but you didn't like it. And when we had talked about this previously, you said, I never used the word pot.
Exactly.
No way I would have said
Exactly.
that. But is that true? Were you a 17-year-old that tried cannabis and went, I don't really know if this is for me?
Yeah, I mean, I was surrounded by kids that were smoking, especially by 10th grade, but I always said no. I mean, I was supposed to be like a professional baseball player, but I tried it the summer after my junior year, and I didn't like it at that point.
Fair. No, I totally get that.
Yeah.
So sort of set the scene for us, because I mentioned, so this is 96. Patrick Henry is what part of Minneapolis is that?
It's on the north side.
Okay, for
North
sure.
Minneapolis.
And cannabis at the late 90s was not hard to find in Minneapolis?
I mean, I never looked for it, but it was always around with my friends. I mean, and I went to an urban inner city school, and so, I mean, it was definitely there. I mean, I know it's in all the suburbs, all the private schools everywhere.
For sure.
Like 75-80% of high school students have tried it. Like, keeping away from kids is kind of a joke because the kids already have it.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I didn't hate it, but I think I went to a party one time, and I must have hit like 8 different blunts, and I remember I ended up home early in the morning, sitting on the couch, feeling my rave waving like the Pacific Ocean, and I was like, I don't even remember how I got home. So I feel like one of those blunts was spiked, like there was something else in there, and it was just way too much for me as a beginner. So like, yeah, that shit was crazy. I mean, the first time I smoked though, it was also at a teenager type of party that was in the suburbs. But I remember, because I always used to tell people, "Let me hit that," and then I would always say "psych" or some shit, like. So when I finally was ready to smoke, all these kids that knew me came outside like, is he really doing it? And I did it, and I didn't really feel that much. But I remember driving home. I had a red Geo Metro. My dad gave it to me. And there was this pit bull running across Penn Avenue. And I was like, I didn't feel super high, but I felt something. It was like my first high. And I was like, this big-ass pit bull was running across the street, and I was like, well, if I continue at this speed, I'm going to run him over. But if I just brake a little bit, then he'll run against the side and bounce off. And that's what happened. You know what I
Okay.
mean? But yeah, I didn't smoke again till I was like for real, become a daily chronic smoker till I was 20.
Okay, for sure.
yeah.
So what in the 3 years between that? Where were you when you were 20? Were you still in Minnesota?
Well, I lived in Louisiana.
Okay.
Like I went out of here after high school. I started in Southern University, so I lived in Shreveport, Louisiana. I mean Baton Rouge, and then I moved also to Shreveport. But this is home, so I'm always here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I started smoking when I was 20, and that's when I moved back here, like the first time I think.
Okay.
And I started smoking every day, and I love it. But there was also this story, and I'm high as hell right now, dabbing in the Dabbler. But I remember I posted some stuff on the internet. You know, it was like America Online chat forum or some shit, and some writer from the Newsweek saw me post a comment about not liking the smell of it and shit, and it was crazy because. I mean, it's a nationwide thing, but that ended up being quoted in like a textbook that one of my friends seen at the U of M one time. So I was like, damn, that shit traveled. And that's like me of all people being documented in some old text as not liking cannabis is just so ironic.
That is very well, and so as I was researching for this, I learned that you at one point had a job at the Walker Arts Center.
Yeah.
And you had sent a letter to like an organizer of an art piece there about their opinion of it, about your opinion of it. Yeah. And that letter and segments of it made it in the New Yorker.
I know.
And so you were just like some guy sharing your opinion in multiple different places that ends up getting picked up, and people are like, hey, tell me a little bit more about this. And so this was sort of one of those times.
Yeah, I learned a lot. And then I also did like this Star Tribune Journalism Explorer program. I should have been a journalist. I regret not doing that.
You wrote a very good piece about prom back when you were in high school.
Oh, shit. That had people angry.
So, all right. So I'll sort of preface a little bit about the article. It was looking at the music being played at prom, and were they playing music that was equitable towards all people that were at prom? Both, what I think the term that you used was white music and black music. What was sort of the reaction to that? This is early Marcus journalism.
Well, it was crazy to see how many high school students found out about the article before we got to school. Maybe it was circulated at the school, but some people were mad, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, Henry was majority black, but it's a very diverse school. I think it still is. But, the music didn't seem appropriate because most people at the prom were probably black. And it was like, there wasn't going to be music that was like North Side type of prom music. I mean, not to say that all music is because all the music is North Side music. But it just didn't seem like culturally, like, it wasn't a good idea.
No,
but the people were mad, the people who thought I was being like racist.
I think what was really cool about reading that article for me is you're someone today who I think of so much as like, this guy lives and breathes social equity. Like you look at the world around us and say, how can we help to uplift people that need it? Yeah. And I think what's so cool is even going back to you as a 17-year-old in high school, writing articles in the paper saying, hey, we're not properly representing the people that are actually here. And I think what's so cool is if you look at the work you're doing today, it's still the same message, just different spots of your life that it comes up. So that's interesting. That's cool.
I've been like this since kindergarten. I mean, I was also like the class clown and like the revolutionary, which is crazy, you know. I literally was voted senior class clown, and I was clowning in kindergarten.
Incredible.
Like it's weird to be like this. I think.
Well, you got to be a little crazy to be in politics.
Yeah. Well.
All right. So next question that I have. So moving along a little bit. So early 2000s, we saw Marcus go from writing papers in the newspaper to actually being involved in local politics. This was your first, I think, introduction to running for office.
What the fuck?
So back in 2001, you ran on the People's Party ticket for the mayor of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So R.T. Ryback would end up winning that year. Yeah. But there was like 16, I think, different candidates that were running for mayor. One of them, Marcus Harcus. So I went back in the archives as one does, and
Of course, we got the historian.
I found this
interviewing you.
picture. Now I'm going to be overlaying it on the screen, so
That's
people are going to be
fucking
seeing
nuts.
it. But so this is
I am crazy.
August
huh?
25th, 2001. You're holding up a sign saying "Words for Work." You're running for mayor. You're out there shaking hands at people. I got both the black and white version, with printed in the Star Tribune, and the Getty's Images one. That's like, to this day, if you search Marcus Harcus in Getty's Image, this picture of you out there raising your voice, trying to activate people, that's what comes up.
Damn, that's fucking wild.
So, I mean, like, I think this is so cool. A, you are so young in this picture.
Man, young as hell.
But B, you're out there, you're trying to make change. I mean, what motivated you originally to get into community activism, organization, like all of this?
Damn, Tanner is good. You should hire him on NPR. Well, damn, I didn't expect all this. I don't even talk about this shit very rarely. You know?
For sure.
But, because I don't even like to talk about it most of the time. But when I was that young, I was a victim of a lot of police abuse, you know, a lot of racial profiling, a lot of harassment. And, yeah, I got assaulted by the police a couple of times, really. One time over cannabis. It was just, yeah, that's just crazy. So, and I began as an activist in high school because, you know, all that school-to-prison pipeline, that's what happens in Minneapolis public schools, especially like North Side or parts of the South Side, but in St. Paul. But, yeah, I did that as like a protest campaign. It wasn't because that I actually thought I could get elected, because I couldn't. You know, you have to have organizational capacity. Mm-hmm. And it was just me being like it was like a protest thing. It was like get involved with these debates, do the media advocacy. Because I learned in high school how, you know, you can leverage these media platforms to inform public opinion, you know, to educate the public.
Yeah.
You know, advocate for causes. So that's what all that was. I mean, I was out there. I was putting my feet on the ground. I was talking to people. I was learning. I was like a baby adult.
Yeah. Well, so I have a quote that you said to the Star Tribune at the time that I think is just so cool. It says, "There must be trust," in reference to the police and the community, saying, "Without trust, there can be no love. And without reciprocal love, there can be no safety." What an approach to public safety in the 90s that I think would ring so true to some of the things that we're still dealing with today. You were out there raising your voice saying, hey, let's deal with this. I think that's cool. So did you win? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Do you want to take a break?
Maybe, but oh man. It helped me a lot because yeah, because there's a lot of trauma, you know.
Yeah, man.
It's a lot of fucking injustice. That's why they call it a criminal legal system instead of a criminal justice system, to people who understand it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of violence. A lot of police terrorism and shit. That's why the shit erupted in Minneapolis the way it did a few years ago, because the shit is bad.
Yeah.
You know, all that glitters ain't gold. Minneapolis is a beautiful city. I mean, it's a lot of suffering here, but yeah, it's like everywhere else. These systems are just not just, you know, and it's not about even the individualism. It's just the way the shit is structured, the way the systems are operated historically, you know.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, it was good for me because I got to address this shit in a constructive way, you know. And, you know, public policies create all of the conditions that we live in. Not just, it's also culture and shit, all types of forces. But, I mean, it's a political economy. So the only way we can change public policy is by advocating to change it, you know. Changing laws, changing the way, you know, dismantling systems through public policy. Because that's the only way to do it. I mean, not the only way. Protesting at the grassroots helps. You know, you got to have the advocacy, you got to have the legislative shit, and you got to have pressure from the public in terms of like those protests help.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the long-term changes, like all the shit that happened with the uprising, and even before that, Minneapolis was the epicenter, I think. I mean, everybody in the world knows about George Floyd because of how Minneapolis reacted.
Yeah.
And to me, I was glad to see all of this because people have been protesting police brutality and racial profiling for decades. And people can argue, but things are safer now as far as police. Like when those 200 cops quit out of 800, you can imagine those were probably some of the worst abusers, you know, and they didn't like that scrutiny, you know. So, yeah, I did that just to, like, speak for all the people who, because most people who are abused by police, they don't go file police report complaints. Because even the ones who do, there's never any justice.
No.
So, yeah, I was proud just to contribute to this long history of activism in the city, protesting police violence. I mean, it's an extremely violent system that we live in terms of, the criminal injustice shitstorm and, school to prison pipeline shit.
If you think about it, like we have, obviously these aren't real statistics, but probably like 1% of people that have these run-ins end up going and filing things, end up going and actually reporting them. And I think probably like 0.1%, if even that, end up running for office to say we need change. So,
funny.
Man, I just think it's cool. I found this picture, and it was one of the things that just sort of made me smile because I know you as the guy who fights for people and who says we need change, be it cannabis, be it anything that's unjust. And this is just another example of that. And it's cool because, you're 20-something years old. Like, I've known you for a while, but not this long. So it was cool to go back and see that sort of stand around.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you did a lot of other activism. I was able to find some work that you did for a couple other community organizations, but I want to sort of jump ahead to 2015. That's when we really see a lot of change coming around here in Minnesota around medical cannabis, around potential measures around adult use cannabis, and you found yourself sort of at the epicenter of that as the executive director of Minnesota NORML. Now, we've talked a little bit about this before, obviously offline, but can you tell me a little bit about the story of how you first really got involved in Minnesota NORML?
Yeah, so in 2014, I think I decided that I didn't want to work any more jobs unless I wanted to work them. And so I've been like a social entrepreneur. And I got a contract position with Minnesota NORML. And so I got a job as executive director of this, legalization advocacy organization. And so, that was like the best and the worst job I ever had.
Well, so it's sort of cool because this is when our paths first crossed. Now, we didn't really know each other super well at the time. I was a kid in the back of the Capitol Rotunda, like sort of looking, waving my sign. You were up front helping to have people come and speak, talking about medical cannabis, but also adult use cannabis, having like Senator Franzen like come out and speak and talk a little bit about some of the early measures around how does legalization look. I think it's cool. You also had a pretty big conference where national experts were brought in, and really I think it was one of the largest, at least one of the first sort of cannabis expos here in Minnesota. Yeah,
that was the what was it? Legalize It Minnesota Political Action Conference at the Minneapolis Convention Center. That was great. Yeah. I mean, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to do a full-time job learning about prohibition, learning about legalization, learning from all types of expert advocates around the country, watching legalization unfold. Because at that time, that was when Colorado and Washington State became the first adult use cannabis markets in the country. So for me, it was at that time that the light bulb came on. Like, why the fuck am I living my life having to creep around over some goddamn herb? Why do I have to worry about everything, like getting harassed, getting arrested, losing your job, losing housing over some weed? So it's way bigger than people having fun getting high. It's about us just wanting to be free and be safe, being well. So I learned so much from that job. I learned about all the fucking the numbers for the arrest. I learned about the disparities in the arrest, which were consistent with all the other racial injustice in every part of the society. But I learned about all the ways that people benefit from cannabis. I mean, I learned about this history, how it was in the pharmacopoeia, how the whole history of prohibition, the many uses of this thing for therapeutic benefits, mind, body, soul. Just having fun, getting high is a good thing. But
what I think is no, dude. What I think is so cool is I unfortunately wasn't able to attend that event. I was like just out of high school at the time, wasn't able to make it. But a lot of the panels were recorded and are still on YouTube today.
Shit.
Like Carl Hart came out, gave a presentation that was right like around the time that his book came out.
Yeah,
and you can go and hear him talk about what this could mean for Minnesota, sort of laying the early work of some of the stuff that we now have today.
Yeah, he was here last summer. He came to this conference I helped organize about psychedelics. Yeah.
Shout out Big Psych.
It's crazy, the full circle thing. You know what I mean? I organized that convention in 2015, and then here he came back like almost a decade later. And now we got legalization when he came back. Full circle.
Well, I got some more pictures for you. So some more from the Star Tribune. The one on the top there, April 21st, it was taken on April 20th, of you counting down on 420 as people were lighting up outside the Capitol. I think that's a great one. I'm obviously going to put that one on the screen, but I just think it's such a classic Marcus photo.
It's funny to look at yourself from the outside.
Yeah.
Somebody just told me last night, you don't know what it's like to experience you from another perspective. And I was like, I should consider that more.
There we go. If only there was some sacred herb that could help him. All right. Yeah. So I want to hear a little bit about the founding of Minnesota Campaign for Full Legalization, because that's when we first met. I was looking for a way to get involved in the campaign around 2018 and was like, man, I wish there was some guy I could get involved with. Was sent to your organization. We met, so that was our first introduction. We've been working together basically ever since. But tell me a little bit about starting that up and what some of the early days were like of that. Okay,
so like when I said the Minnesota Normal Job was the best and the worst, it ended up, like, it was a wonderful experience, but there was a lot of dysfunction and shit, and there were a lot of people involved who just like to have meetings and show up and hear themselves talk and shit, and they don't really want to take the real political action to try to make things happen, No offense, but yeah, fuck that.
Yeah, I think we each have sat in a lot of meetings.
So I mean, as an organizer, you're going to have way too many meetings anyway, so you should just say no to most meetings. Unless, like, it's really, like, advancing some work. And so I was like, let me form this, my own organization, not mine, but an organization that's really about that life. So in, like, the fall of 2018, I did this event at New Rules in North Minneapolis. It was live streamed. Like 80 people showed up. Because there's been a lot of people who want to do something, but we didn't really have advocacy organizations that were really about organizing. They might have been about doing events or building lists and then not using the list. So I wanted to try to help create some momentum. And yeah, I met you. I met Jess Hansen. I met John Barty. And so many other people, and we just created some model legislation. You and I created a couple of voter guides. We were just trying to, inform public opinion, improve, public support for legalization, try to influence legislators. We would call these legislators. The model legislation, I think, was pretty good because essentially some of those ideas ended up in the bill that we have today.
Yeah.
Like the variety of licenses and trying to, like, prevent big marijuana from, like, dominating the entire, supply chain and retail market. So, yeah. And I mean, we did that. We supported Jess Hansen in running for state legislature, and getting an insider in there. Shout out to her. She was one of the most ride or die people. I mean, we've got some distance between us now, but, I'll always love and respect and appreciate her. Yeah. But yeah, I met you and John. I mean, in my cannabis, I don't like to do letter grades, and I'm trying to avoid doing like Mount Rushmores. But like the three of y'all, if I had to do one, would be on there for my personal,
I appreciate that.
part,
Man.
with cannabis.
Well, absolutely. Likewise, I agree with you that like it was like the core four in my mind back in the day of like being at booths outside the state fair, or calling legislatures or whatever be it. It was so cool meeting. John was, thinking back, he was so young at the time.
Yeah,
John was young enough that if he went to a legal state, he would not have been able to go into a dispensary.
Right.
And now seeing, I just think it's been so cool to sort of watch the change of people that we were working with then and where they are in the industry today.
That's why we really gotta like invest in young leadership, because a lot of times the younger people are the more visionary and more courageous, because a lot of middle-aged people are jaded and shit.
Yeah.
But then you also got to have the elders that are the real visionary progressives, because a lot of them are, to collaborate. Like intergenerational shit is what I'm about, for the rest of my life. But yeah, shout out to the young leaders,
I dig it. Well, we're going to take a very short break here. When we get back, I want to ask you a little bit more about sort of the creation of the legalization bill we have today and some of your thoughts on how our program might be rolling out. So we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. So, Marcus, you've been involved in cannabis activism longer than, like, I've been involved in, like, politics generally. Like, going back to my first introduction to cannabis politics, that's when you were running running Minnesota NORML. When I had sort of wanted to figure out how do I find my role, you were over at the campaign, really introduced me to that. I'm curious, what are some of the stories of people that you've talked to? I mean, obviously you don't have to, like, shout out names of people specifically, but have there been people's stories that you've learned over your experience of talking to Minnesotans that sort of stand out to you either years later?
I mean, there's a lot of stories. I'd have to sort through my memory, but I remember one time we had an event where there was this deaf woman, and Janata, she was working with me at the time. She posted this sign on the wall. I don't remember the exact question, but like, what has cannabis done for your life? And this one woman said, it helped me to not kill myself. And, there's so many stories with mental or physical health benefits and shit. And there's so many people who had felonies and had their, experience being disenfranchised for years because of cannabis convictions. But I want to talk about a friend of mine named Jason, and he got raided in like 2018, 2019, I think. And he was just growing plants in the back of his house, and he grew wonderful cannabis. Like, he loved it so much, and he was so skilled. But he had a little fire. The fire department came, city of Bloomington, and they called the police because there were little cannabis lamps or whatever. And he ended up having he and his wife were both arrested in front of like their 3-year-old child or something, real toddler. And they ended up, having to spend all this money to defend himself. He ended up having to like sell his house, and it was such a disruptive experience that he moved his family, including his baby, across the country to get out of here. And I was in contact with him recently, just through text, just checking on him. Like, man, the laws have changed here. Why don't you come back? Why don't you grow some fire-ass legal cannabis? And it's funny that one of the days I did that, he said, man, I just filed bankruptcy today. All, stemming from the aftermath of that raid and that criminalization back in like 2019. So I'm like, man, I want to raise some money and help him to come back so he can grow in the legal market and redeem his life, because that damage from that criminalization was serious, and it was just over cannabis. So that's one story that sticks out.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think of like letter writing events that we did sort of around the state, trying to encourage people to write to their lawmakers, really get involved. And they became at times almost like listening sessions, like people just coming, sharing their trauma, sharing, man, I was just some cannabis consumer, just like all of you. And then one day the police showed up and my life changed.
Yeah. I mean, this is what we know it works most effectively if you're lobbying is you have to tell stories, you know? This is what you do with the media. You tell stories.
Yeah.
I mean, this is them telling a story.
Yeah.
You know?
I think what's so cool is the campaign for full legalization, I think, is the organization that most stands out in my mind is really putting those stories at the forward of really saying we need full legalization, not because, you know, it's cool to go to stores. Like, that is cool. It's not because, like, we can try all these different dab products or whatever, but it's because people's lives have been upended, and that's wrong.
Right. Thousands and thousands. We got thousands and thousands of Minnesotans who are waiting on the Cannabis Expungement Board to get started.
Yeah.
I think what's holding up is Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's office. They haven't appointed the final person they need to get started because I don't know the title, but the woman who's in charge of the Cannabis Expungement Board, Susan Segal, she's ready to go. So there's a lot of people that still need these felonies removed off their record today. It's 2024. So yeah, please get that done, Attorney General Ellison.
Yeah, no, I think it's important not just focusing on like the past of cannabis, but today we're still having prohibition continue to sort of eke its way in.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear a little bit about sort of the process from the model legislation that was created back in like 2018. People can go, there's actually a video, I am going to put it in the show notes, but I think it's so good, of an event that we did at New Rules, sort of introducing some of our ideas. Things like micro businesses. Such a crazy idea. And now seeing some of that come to fruition, going through model legislation to House File 600, through listening sessions to House File 100. I mean, what was it like to really sort of ride the wave of, hey, we should legalize, through how do we legalize?
I mean, the thing is with legislators is they would have no clue what to do. They don't actually write the bills. They, you know, the chief author, they can tell the revisor's office what to change and what to add. But like those ideas are brought forth based on the precedent of how things have been done in other states and reports from like lobbyists, advocates, and even people like within the different government offices who advocate for things in legislation. So they didn't know what to do. So we just looked at what was done in all the other states because there's advocates around the country. You know, this is a national thing, not just Minnesota. So we got to see what other states already did, and we found out about the things that didn't work, like banning, allowing municipalities to ban cannabis business.
For sure.
Like having the license fees cost too much, you know? So we did the best we could just scouring over the analyses of what had been done in other states and just said, you know, identified the shit that was not equitable, like charging people $100,000 for a license. How many people can do that? Like not including people with felonies in the legal market, like saying you can't have a job or a business. So yeah, we just tried to help educate them quickly, you know, the ones who want to learn, by just summarizing this is what would work, this is what wouldn't. And sometimes like you're proposing things that really ain't good enough, but it's like, because politics is the art of compromise, so you got to like include some things that you may not love, you know, within your proposals. So it's like we're saying, well, you should legalize 8 ounces, but really we're saying people shouldn't have any limit at home. But, you know, we wanted to propose at least much larger personal possession limits than had been done in other states, which in the beginning were like super prohibition light. Like, oh, you can have 1 ounce or 1.5 ounces at home, but more than that is a felony or some shit or misdemeanor. Like, yeah, Minnesota is not perfect, but we are better. Our thing is shaping up to be better than almost everywhere.
Yeah. I think one thing that was cool for me at the time when I was sort of not organization shopping, that's not a good way to do it, but there were a lot of people in the state at the time sort of trying to look at what does cannabis look like. One of the things that I thought was most important about the campaign is that you were saying expungement is a required part of any legalization effort. Absolutely. We can't have stores open if we have people in prison for cannabis.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, throughout the process of watching and being involved with the legislative session for leading up to legalization, you know, you would hear all these narratives and they usually end up focusing on the industry part. Like legalization is about the consumer and the entrepreneurs, but really legalization was about ending the criminalization. Of course, we want a legal market. We all want this thing to be powerful, creative. We want the best products and the best stores. We want a great, thriving Minnesota cannabis market. But it's, if the people only focus on that part of the money, the profiteering, but they don't focus on the injustice and making right all that the harms that's been done through the drug war, through cannabis prohibition, like what the fuck?
Yeah.
First things first. Yeah.
So now really the big question that I'm going to ask you the question knowing there's not a good answer to it, that there's no perfect response to this question, but I really am curious. We now have House File 100 passed in effect, some provisions still waiting to be implemented, but in effect. We've got House File 4757, the one that just passed and was signed into law today. We've got a cannabis program that's shaking out to look like it might be allowing social equity candidates to have a real chance at becoming part of our market. Obviously, not enough in the definition of who's a social equity applicant, not enough in the funding supports, but at least seeing an attempt. What do you think about the state of cannabis in Minnesota?
Well, I think the state of cannabis is what we make of it. I think we are going to have a more accessible, more equitable market simply because of the micro business license opportunity. I think sometimes people imagine Minnesota is going to be as bad as other states, like Illinois or something, or California, or Washington State. I mean, the list goes on. Most of the states really didn't do legalization well, really.
For real.
But I think Minnesota is going to be more equitable because people only going to have to spend $750 for a license if they can raise enough capital, if they can organize good teams, if they really love this thing deeper than trying to like fantasize about a green rush, and imagine that this shit is going to be super lucrative for everybody. It's not. But I'm excited, especially because I'm going to get in this industry and try to set the standard.
So that transitions so nicely. So, Marcus, I've known you through cannabis activism, and I think we all knew legalization would eventually come, but we were so focused on let's get this bill across, let's make it legal, let's figure out how to get it legal in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Now we're soon sort of on the other side of that. What comes next for Marcus Harcus now in a legal adult use state?
Well, I'm going to start up a cannabis company, and I'm not going to like share branding and stuff now because it's not the time. But yeah, I want to form a vertically integrated cannabis company. I mean, at minimum, I'll focus on the retail side, and I want to create like a destination dispensary. I want to do this for like connoisseurs, and like the brand that I'm developing is going to be, I'd say, the most extraordinary of the Minnesota retail brands. I'm also going to try to get into cultivation so that we can produce the best concentrates. So, yeah, we'll specialize in flower and concentrates. We'll have everything that's good. But, yeah, I'm excited about that. Like, I come from this nonprofit background, which is not profitable.
Yeah.
And, frankly, this is the point. Like, I've volunteered thousands and thousands and thousands of fucking hours. Like, it's crazy to think. And I don't regret it at all. I love most of it. But as a middle-aged man with kids, and a lot of shit to do, I'm going to try to create some wealth. I understand that cannabis is not going to be like my fortune, but I am confident that we'll have like a multi-million-dollar company and do well and like model the way of what it looks like to take care of the people within the company and the customers, to value the staff and share equity with them and the customers above the profit.
Yeah.
And I feel like we can demonstrate what it looks like to some degree create community through a retail company that's really about conscious consumption. yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm about.
Well, I got to be honest, man. I'm not just blowing smoke. I think if there's anyone that would be able to create a business built fully around community, it's you. And so I'm really excited to see sort of what that looks like, what the future holds for Marcus here in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I'm not going to make this thing synonymous with me. Like, I really want to just, like, fall back to where you don't see me unless you're seeing me working the business. But my company is really going to honor the divine divinity of femininity, of in respecting, you know, honoring women. I mean, cannabis that we consume is the female plant, you know. So I want my brand to represent the connoisseurs, but really like honor women, you know, and girls.
Well,
I mean, the girls can't come in unless they're 21 plus.
Yeah,
and then they're women.
Yeah. Well, so a question that I don't have typed on our paper, but I am curious. If people, I mean, heard your story today, they heard sort of about your background in community activism and are thinking, you know, that's a guy that I want to help support become part of our industry. You okay if I put your email in the show notes? People can reach out. How's best for people to get in contact?
I mean, I don't mind. I do have some leads on some funding, but I want to keep my options open for, you know, depending on, I'm not trying to over leverage, but I am looking for investors and I'm looking for the right partners. It's quality over quantity. All money ain't good money. I don't like greedy people or desperate people. Yeah, I don't want anybody whose number one why would be to make money. I mean, obviously, we've created a great business. It's going to make good money, but yeah, it's people over profits. And yeah.
It's about changing the world and accepting nothing less.
And but I want to create a business. I can't afford to lose, and so I want to create an enterprise that is thriving. I mean, reality is most cannabis businesses are not going to do well. They're going to fail like every other industry, maybe even a higher failure rate. But the cream will rise to the top, and I'm trying to be involved with that. You know, creating that.
I take it.
Because, I mean, we're really curators of the cannabis culture. So we got to rise to the occasion of legalization. We can do all this stuff freely and publicly and safely. So, I mean, damn. I mean, I'm sitting here with, like, the historian of cannabis in Minnesota. Like, Tanner came with the heat. I'm going to have to create an interview. I'm going to interview you soon.
Oh, well, come into a future Northern Lights Texas. We'll make that happen. No, Marcus, I so appreciate that. And just like, I appreciate all that you've done for this community. I mean, like, thinking about how this podcast, we wouldn't be sitting here had we not connected about starting the college, had you not inspired me back in 2016 to really say, we can change the world just by believing it and doing it. And so, Marcus, shout out to you. Thanks so much for being on today, as always. Thanks so much for letting me ask you questions, but truly just thank you for inspiring me.
Thank you. I mean, if it wasn't for people like you, I don't know. I might have given up, you know, because that stuff is not easy, especially, you know, volunteering fucking hundreds or thousands of hours. So it's about the people that you work with, and you've been so consistent and so brilliant and so righteous, so powerful. I mean, you're the man. Everybody is learning this if they don't already know it. I'm so proud of you. I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, well,
I mean, there's no me without we. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
You're the best, man.
All right, well, we're going to take a short break here. We're going to do a dab.
Mr. President.
When we get back, we got a little clip from our Super Soil Magic class that we did with Cornell Urban Agriculture. The first 10 minutes, if you want to catch the whole class, we got it available. You can go to our website, check that whole thing out. But we'll be back in just a couple minutes here.
Yeah, thank you.